Hello, Siegfried here again. Today's video subject is what do I think about JRPGs? Wait, what's a JRPG? In case you didn't know, Japanese role-playing games. And specifically, we're talking about Japanese computer role-playing games, like the one in the picture behind me, which is called Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's a great game, but it's really cool. Okay, so this question comes from my longtime friend and former roommate, Joel. So thanks, Joel. Love to talk about gaming. All right. Well, I don't have a ton of experience with JRPGs. I've played a fair number. I played Final Fantasy VII, was kind of my first one. I also played 8 and 9. I played a couple Final Fantasy Tactics. I played, I think, Final Fantasy 1, 2. They have different numbering systems between Japan and America. Gets confusing. I also played a lot of Fire Emblem, this game behind me, which I really like. It's an old series. There's the brand new one is this Three Houses game. And a fair number of others that I've probably forgotten. I have online a big list of all the games I've won. It has a fair number of JRPGs on there. All right, so what do I think about these things? Well, first let's talk a little bit about why there's a distinction. So Western RPGs tended to come from the game Dungeons & Dragons. And the most classic RPGs that I used to play were called the Gold Box games. They were TSR labeled games. You have a little overhead map, and your character wanders around, and then they fight a monster. It zooms in, and your character is fighting some monsters. And there's like a big square, and there's little hexes here, and your characters move around and fight and stuff like that. So that's kind of traditional Western-style computer role-playing game. Yeah, other games, kind of a first-person, you see what your characters see as they walk down a hallway, and then you see monsters in front of you, and you fight them. The wizardry-style games were like that. I'm also fond of those. Now, in a JRPG, similar in the other, there's a story and your characters wander around on a map. When they fight the monsters, the old ones, Final Fantasy, what would happen is your characters would line up on this side, and then the monsters would line up on this side. There would be like 1 to 4 monsters and 1 to 4 characters, and then they kind of take turns attacking each other in a line, just slugfest, who can hit the hardest. And they heal and cast spells and stuff. So that's kind of what typified them. The other thing that is important is they have anime-style characters, so Japanese-style animated characters are typical for JRPGs, is where Western ones have, well, more Western-style characters. They try to make them more realistic, look more like illustrations or photographs. There's some crossover between the two, but in Japan, the anime style is really popular. So I think those are the two things that really exemplify them. But there are some other tropes that we'll talk about as well that kind of get in the way. Let's see. Let's start with the combat system, the lineup style. That's what's most associated with them. Now, these days, the JRPGs are getting away from that style of combat. So the Final Fantasy VII remake, which is probably my favorite of all time, JRPG, Final Fantasy VII, the original. The remake gives a more action-oriented combat. They don't line up. It's not turn-based. You run around the room, swinging and dodging and hacking. And then you do a special move when your power bar gets up there. It's a little bit more like Fallout or Batman Arkham Asylum or something like that. It's very action-oriented. Very different from what we had before. A big departure. So the lineup style is kind of now more of a retro style, but it's still pretty iconic for JRPGs. I'm not a huge fan of the lineup combat. I think it's pretty cool. It works in some games. In Final Fantasy VII, it worked really well. I tend to prefer a grid-based turn combat or turn combat on a map that's maybe not grid-based but is strategic and positional, and our guys are here and we're blocking this rock wall, and so the enemies have to come here, and I like that kind of stuff, right? That kind of tactical map. And the tactics-style JRPGs use that kind of a system, and I tend to enjoy them. Fire Emblem here definitely is along those lines and not the lineup combat style, so that's why it's one of my favorite JRPG series. So that style of combat, not my favorite, but it's okay. And there were a lot of mechanics. It forces people to rely more on the mechanics of character building and timing and ability development and team dynamics. And I think that's great. That really influenced a lot of Western RPGs. And they started to use these mechanics for leveling up and stuff instead of just basing it on the old style Dungeons & Dragons, which was super influential early on. So I think that's really good, and that kind of crossover helps make all the RPGs better. Let's see. Anime-style characters, I think, is much more like almost always a JRPG has anime characters. Not 100%, but 90, 95%. I really like anime-style characters. I think, A, they're cute, of course, but B, there's something about the fact that they're not realistic in appearance, where you can do a lot more to stylize each character. You give them crazy blue hair, weird hairstyles, weird pinched faces or broad faces, or giant bulgy muscles, or whatever it happens to be, really helps bring out individuality in each character and give them a unique look that's easy to identify, even if they're a small little icon somewhere on a map or something. And so I think that's a big advantage over a Western RPG where everybody's got some brown hair and a helmet and stuff, and they start to all kind of look the same. So that sort of non-realistic, stylized character interpretation, I think, is actually a big advantage when making a role-playing game, which is about character and setting. And so I think it's pretty important. So I really like that a lot. Dialogue is an area where I don't like JRPG dialogue most of the time. The characters tend to sort of talk about inane subjects. They're like, oh, those flowers are really blue, aren't they? And I always liked the flowers. When I was growing up, I don't care about the flowers so much. I want to get to the action, the story, the heart, the drama. But JRPG characters like to express their feelings, and they do it in a very reserved kind of way, and they're always showing that they're very embarrassed, and they're very hesitant to talk, and they're nervous. And I get kind of bored. I just don't like it. There's a lot of dialogues with like ... and the lips, and the next character is really ... I'm like, no, thank you. Okay, if it's in voice acting, I think that's fine, but if I'm going to read that in text, I don't want to do it. So I don't really like when the characters open their mouths all that much. Now, in a Western RPG, I like the Western style of writing for characters a little bit better, and storytelling in that regard. So I tend to favor Western in that area. Plot, I think, is kind of a mixed bag, because JRPGs have all kinds of different plots. Some of them are incredibly zany and crazy, and I love that. Some of them, frankly, they don't make any sense, like Biohazard or Resident Evil series. Why is anyone doing any of this stuff? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's crazy. But still, again, pretty fun. So I don't really mind that. It's fantasy. It can be crazy if it wants to be. Western ones tend to have a little more grit, a little more detail, and I tend to like that a little bit better. So I tend to favor Western RPGs in their plotting and storytelling as well. So I would say overall, I'm more of a Western RPG fan than a JRPG fan, but I respect JRPGs and I play them sometimes, and it's a great different style, and they really like to innovate. I think American RPG makers are a little bit more abound, and they do more copying, and they're a little less creative in that sense. They're a little more stuck in tradition. So I really admire JRPGs for that reason. Well, so that's what I think about them. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.